Imagine a world where every institution we encounter, school, work, government, serves a double purpose. On the surface, they promise us freedom, opportunity, even happiness. Yet, beneath these noble banners, they often operate as formidable machines, molding us into predictable parts of a vast social puzzle. In this episode, we'll unravel the hidden philosophies underpinning our education and economy, drawing on thinkers like Goffman, Illich, Foucault, bell hooks, and Krishnamurti, to reimagine why society is built as it is and how you might break free from its deepest traps. In this journey, we'll peel back the layers of these seemingly benevolent structures, questioning their underlying philosophies and unintended consequences. From the classrooms of our childhood to the career paths of adulthood, we'll examine how society's script is written, internalized, and often unknowingly followed. Are we truly free agents, or are we, to some extent, products of a system designed for its own perpetuation? Let's delve into these critical questions, exploring 1. The prism of education, freedom or formulation. From our earliest days, we're told an inspiring story. Education is the golden road to prosperity and fulfillment. But let's pause and ask, when a child sits in a room with fixed rows, reciting lessons on command, are they being liberated, or are they being trained? Across history, philosophers and critics have questioned whether classrooms serve human flourishing, or whether they are subtle factories focused on manufacturing standardized citizens. Ivan Illich, for example, argued that schooling isn't merely about transmitting knowledge, it's about endorsing norms, punctuality, obedience, replicable thinking. Imagine a school as a microcosm. Bells dictate when learning starts and stops. Students request permission for basic needs. Every move is tracked and categorized. Over time, these rituals shape not just knowledge, but self-perception. Education, then, becomes a molding process, less about inspiration, more about formation. Yet why do we accept this so voluntarily? Why do millions of parents, teachers, and children buy into the myth that schools solely exist for their benefit? This is the power of narrative and architecture. Long corridors resemble assembly lines. The hierarchy is clear, teachers above, students below. In subtle ways, these structures mirror not just factories, but also correctional facilities and military barracks. Bell Hooks contends that education could be a practice of freedom, but only if we radically rethink what and how we teach. Until then, she says, it risks being domestication masquerading as enlightenment, making us valuable to systems, not to ourselves. 2. The purpose beneath the promise. Why educational systems endure. Let's peel another layer. Who truly benefits from the way education is structured? If schools were purely engines for opportunity, why do so many graduates find themselves trained for jobs that barely sustain them, or burdened by debts incurred in pursuit of prosperity? Critical theorists from Marx to Bourdieu warn us, educational systems, intentionally or not, reinforce existing hierarchies. Through sorting, ranking, and credentialing, they prepare what economist David Graeber calls the labor force for a lifetime of compliance and competition. Think about grades. On paper, they are objective. In reality, they become a social passport, translating personal curiosity into numerical value. It's not just what you know, but how you compare, and more ominously, whether you've learned to value that comparison. The school report card isn't just a reflection of knowledge. It's the first credit score, the first resume line, the beginning of your measurable market value. Through repeated cycles, young people learn to internalize not just learning, but their relative place in a wider system, the human marketplace of labor. 3. The conditioning of time, introducing clockwork discipline. In school, time ceases to be personal. Hours are broken into periods. Work is accompanied by the shrill ring of bells. Transitions are timed to precise intervals. What's the lesson at the core of this regiment? Krishnamurti called this the colonization of consciousness. Children who learn to subjugate their internal rhythms are later far easier to assimilate into rigid, externally governed environments in adulthood. Whether on the assembly line, the office desk, or the cash register, the training is the same. Your time is not your own. Contemporary research in neuropsychology supports this view. Intrinsic motivation dwindles in environments dominated by extrinsic control. In the end, students don't just learn algebra and grammar. They imbibe chronic stress and perpetual urgency as a normal state of being. 4. Fragmented knowledge. Barriers to holistic insight. Modern education doesn't teach the world as a whole, but as a collection of divided disciplines: mathematics, literature, science, each in its compartment. Seldom are connections made between history and economics, psychology and politics, biology and technology. What's lost in this fragmentation? As educated John Taylor Gatto points out, specialization breeds proficiency, but also ignorance. It discourages seeing the system as a whole, preventing students from recognizing interdependencies. The result is a society peopled with narrow experts, highly efficient in their lanes, but unable to critique or reimagine the larger pattern they are part of. This compartmentalization serves the labor market well. It ensures a supply of highly trained specialists who excel in their niches, but are unlikely to challenge the system itself. 5. The myth, dream versus reality. A central mantra of educational life: work hard, and you will rise. This doctrine, inscribed in classrooms and echoed in pop culture, is modern society's foundational myth. But how does this square with reality? Social mobility studies reveal sobering facts. Your family's wealth, ethnicity, and even postal code remain the strongest predictors of economic fate. The school, it turns out, often rewards the already advantaged, while rationalizing disadvantage as the consequence of laziness or lack of talent. Pierre Bourdieu described this as symbolic violence, when the system's inequality is disguised as natural order, and its victims come to believe their place is justified. Narratives of the self-made billionaire or the janitor's child turned CEO do exist, but function more as exceptions that prove the rule, fueling hope in the hearts of millions while leaving structures untouched. 6. Normalization, deviance, and labels. Institutions sort us not only by performance, but also by normality. Learning disabilities, behavior problems, attention disorders, these categories suggest medical neutrality, but are handled in profoundly political ways. Michel Foucault saw this as the gaze of normalization, a subtle power that rewards conformity and marginalizes difference. Once internalized, this gaze rarely requires external enforcement. Students begin to judge themselves by institutional standards, shaping their identities to fit external criteria. This process isn't neutral. It determines who is seen as promising, problematic, or in need of intervention. It reifies the system's values as common sense, and those who differ become pathologized rather than embraced for their diversity. 7. Credentials as gatekeepers, diploma inflation. Why do jobs that once required only experience now demand degrees, certifications, or even advanced diplomas? Credential inflation, sociologists suggest, serves a new function in maintaining hierarchies. The more people have access to education, the more scarce markers, diplomas, certifications, are needed to differentiate applicants. This is not a sign of increased merit, but of a system raising barriers to mask the inclusion of marginalized groups. Credentials become less about genuine expertise and more about signaling conformity. The gate is always moving just out of reach, ensuring the exclusivity of opportunity, even as the rhetoric remains universal. 8. Exceptionalism as social glue. The problem of race success stories. A society in which millions stagnate, while a tiny handful ascend spectacularly, needs a compelling story. We often lionize those exceptions, the rare leaders or icons who made it through hard work and grit. These stories are essential for the myth of fairness to persist. By highlighting the possibility of extraordinary upward mobility, the system diverts attention from structural inequalities, implying individual failure as the sole cause for stagnation or decline. 9. The debtor's trap, financial chains in young lives. Higher education, once publicly funded, now often hinges on private or government loans. The promise is future prosperity. The reality is often decades of debt. Student loans, unique among debts, can rarely be discharged, binding graduates to repayment regardless of personal circumstance. Here is where financial discipline replaces the rod and the rulebook. The dream of learning becomes lifelong obligation. Decisions about career, family, activism, and even geography are shaped by the need to service these debts. Maurizio Lazzarato coined the term indebted man, a human being whose future is always already pledged to others, trapped in a cycle of repayment that colors every life decision. The result? A docile workforce less able to dissent, less likely to question, and forever oriented toward financial survival. 10. The psychology of alienation, the profound human cost. Alienation, Karl Marx observed, is not just material but existential. It's the sense that life is no longer one's own. When work is routinized, goals are externally imposed, and rewards are extrinsic, people are left with a divided self. The worker in the office, the student in the classroom, the consumer in the mall, all play prescribed roles, often at odds with their own creativity, identity, and dreams. Philosophers like Simone Weil and Albert Camus saw this as the central dilemma of modernity. How can individuals recover meaning, purpose, and autonomy in systems designed for predictability and compliance? Higher education, once publicly funded, now often hinges on private or government loans. The promise is future prosperity. The reality is often decades of debt. Student loans, unique among debts, can rarely be discharged, binding graduates to repayment regardless of personal circumstance. Here's where financial discipline replaces the rod and the rulebook. The dream of learning becomes lifelong obligation. Decisions about career, family, activism, and even geography are shaped by the need to service these debts. Maurizio Lazzarato coined the term indebted man, a human being whose future is always already pledged to others, trapped in a cycle of repayment that colors every life decision. The result? A docile workforce less able to dissent, less likely to question, and forever oriented toward financial survival. 11. The internalization of power, from control to self-surveillance. Institutions no longer require brute force. Instead, they produce subjects who not only comply, but desire to comply. By internalizing the standards and expectations of schools and workplaces, individuals become self-regulating. You check your grades, critique your resume, measure your productivity, and police your own leisure. Rarely is an external authority needed. The ideal worker and model student live within, guiding your choices and constraining your possibility. 12. Identity as occupation, the final fusion. In modern societies, people increasingly define themselves by what they do for a living. I'm an engineer. I'm a project manager. The boundaries between work and self dissolve. The colonization of time and energy is complete. Here, philosopher Byung-Chul Han points out the paradox of freedom. When economic identities are internalized, critique becomes personal failure. The system never needs to punish. Burnout, anxiety, and exhaustion suffice. 13. Paths to resistance, philosophical reimagining in practice. Are we doomed to accept this world as it is? The history of philosophy offers a resounding no. Nietzsche urged a revaluation of all values, a fundamental renewal of thinking and living. Foucault saw practices of freedom as forged within the cracks of the system, not merely outside. Bell Hook's champions engaged pedagogy, where teachers and students co-create knowledge and question received wisdoms. Ivan Illich encouraged the creation of learning webs, spaces untethered to institutional control. Krishnamurti pushed for the deconstruction of all authority, encouraging free inquiry and self-knowledge. Real resistance, these thinkers show, isn't grand rebellion or utopian escape. It begins in micro-acts, choosing what to value, refusing to conflate personal worth with achievement, creating communities that challenge conformity, and nurturing lifelong inquiry beyond commodified learning. Prompt, a person sitting alone in a vast library, surrounded by towering shelves filled with books, representing the endless pursuit of knowledge. Style, introspection, intellectual curiosity. Ethereal lighting. In modern societies, people increasingly define themselves by what they do for a living. I'm an engineer. I'm a project manager. The boundaries between work and self dissolve. The colonization of time and energy is complete. Here, philosopher Byung-Chul Han points out the paradox of freedom. When economic identities are internalized, critique becomes personal failure. The system never needs to punish. Burnout, anxiety, and exhaustion suffice. 14. Strategic minimalism, redefining success and freedom. In an age of relentless productivity, redefining need is revolutionary. Voluntary simplicity, the cultivation of intrinsic satisfaction, and the pursuit of cooperative ventures offer tangible ways to reduce dependence on systems of control. Economic philosopher Juliet Score describes the potential of plentitude, a shift from frantic consumption to practices of local production, mutual aid, and flexible, creative work. By demanding less and building more collectively, people can carve out pockets of real autonomy within oppressive systems. 15. Reclaiming your time. New relationships with work and play. The partitioning of time loses its inevitability if we question its necessity. Movements for slow laning, sabbaticals, and non-linear career paths challenge the treadmill logic of school-work retirement. The Greek idea of skol, leisure time devoted to dialogue, reflection, and self-cultivation, can be resurrected. It's not about idleness, but about building a rhythm of life governed by curiosity and community, not clocks and calculations. 16. The promise and peril of technology. Automation and artificial intelligence offer both new shackles and new freedoms. They can intensify exploitation, or, if society reorders its values, liberate vast stretches of human time for authentic creativity, caregiving, and contemplation. Hey, philosopher Hannah Arendt's distinction between labor and work is vital. May labor sustains the system, work transforms the world and gives life its meaning. The danger is that without reimagining purpose, new technology simply tightens old chains. 17. Scarcity versus abundance, a new social horizon. Scarcity, the idea that resources, jobs, and rewards must be competed for, is a social construct. The alternative is a society organized around abundance, mutual support, and creative flourishing. Philosopher Cornelius Castoriadis argued that every society invents its own imaginary. By questioning the myths at its core, new possibilities arise. If knowledge, community, and the means of life are treated as commons, not commodities, then education and work could be reconfigured as spheres of fulfillment and cooperation. 18. Practicing philosophical experimentation in daily life. Change begins not only in grand theory, but in daily choices and micro-resistances. 1. Form learning circles outside official settings. 2. Replace performance ranking with shared inquiry. 3. Volunteer time for causes that challenge dominant values. 4. Support cooperatives, mutual aid groups, or collectives. 5. Resist reductive labels and advocate for holistic education. 6. Prioritize relationships and experiences over consumption. 19. Conclusion. Building new paths. Now, as this exploration draws to a close, one question lingers. With this knowledge, will you continue marching to the rhythm of society's inherited scripts, or will you experiment with new modes of learning, working, and living? What aspect of your relationship to education, work, or money are you willing to rethink or rebel against? Perhaps, like Socrates, you'll begin asking uncomfortable questions. Or like Simone de Beauvoir, you'll be moved to solidarity. Or maybe you'll simply pause, today, and find a moment of freedom, even in a system designed to deny it. If this conversation challenged you, write in the comments, "I question the script." Share this journey with anyone searching for deeper understanding. Subscribe for future explorations in philosophy that not only explain the world, but invite you to change it. See you in the next video.